The U.S. to ban Chinese tech in cars. The U.S. is planning to ban certain hardware and software made in China and Russia from cars, trucks, and buses in the U.S. due to security risks. Officials say that they were worried that the technology in question, used for autonomous driving and to connect cars to other networks, could allow enemies to remotely manipulate cars on American roads. There is currently minimal use of Chinese or Russian-made software in American cars, but Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said that the plans were targeted and proactive steps to protect the U.S. Cars today have cameras, microphones, GPS tracking, and other technologies connected to the internet. She said in a statement, it doesn't take much imagination to understand how a foreign adversary with access to this information could pose a serious risk to both our national security and the privacy of U.S. citizens. Chinese officials said the U.S. was broadening the concept of national security to unfairly target Chinese firms. And this is from the BBC. On that note,
yeah,
I have recently watched one of the latest Fast and Furious movies with Charlize Theron, where she's like able to remote into like all of the cars and like the whole movie,
like
and all of the cars are going there.
I thought the same thing when I read this.
And I was like, that's where my mind immediately went to, where like all these cars, just magic cars that didn't have autonomous driving, but like had access to like the drivetrain so that she could like it was like, yeah, it's a movie. It's a fun movie. It's an action movie. It's completely fictitious, but that's cool. But that's where my mind went, going like, oh yeah, like
it's like Fast and the Furious.
It's like Fast and the Furious. Yeah, it's exactly like that. So, is this move surprising?
No.
After the drone stuff with the DJI or
After
previous
the drone
stream,
stuff,
this was like a month ago.
The Canadian ban or like the Canadian increased scrutiny of foreign investment in tech companies.
Yeah.
Like this has been an ongoing trend that we've talked about over and over again on this stream, because the governments
are seeing definitely the risks to more interconnected tools online.
And who knows how much of it's about national security? Who knows how much of it's about economics?
Yep. We'll keep the tinfoil hats off.
Yeah,
we're not going to get down. We're not going to go down that road. But I definitely see why the government is just saying, well, we don't want to chance it. And who knows?
Yeah.
Right? So is the move surprising? Absolutely not.
And expect more moves like this.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
By the time we've seen a third one of these, this is a trend.
So what do you suspect would, like, if you see this trend, what would be the next thing that you could imagine that?
I could see.
So we've done cell phones. So Huawei, we've done cell phone towers. We've done drones. We have done now cars, buses, trucks.
So there were a few. We had Canada went really broad with just like the new restrictions on foreign investment in Canadian tech.
And that was just foreign investment, period. Just money. Yeah, money in general. They just went for the money.
We had the ban on GPU exports to China.
Yes.
Which was a huge thing.
Yep, that was huge.
I could see that going the other way. Now I could imagine government starting to put restrictions on where chips are manufactured.
Yes, I would say the same thing.
Right, because
Taiwan's going to be a real hot market real soon, because that's where most of the chip manufacturing, the Taiwan semiconductor.
A large portion of it already happens there.
Yep.
I know Intel has been making moves to do more production on the U.S.
Yes, and they've been very vocal about that, and they've gotten some funding for that. It's billions of dollars of funding.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see some restrictions in like the semiconductor industry in terms of where.
So this is talking specifically about
or transported through
software. This wasn't a hardware thing. Hardware and software. So you're saying the hardware restrictions are chips. It was chips and software in the DJI stuff, the drone stuff.
Well, it was the drones. Period.
Drones.
They didn't go break it down to the components.
No, they just said those.
I'm saying I could see them targeting the base components more strictly, right? So they targeted the GPUs and said, okay, we don't want these going to China because we don't want them using them for AI or reverse engineering them to make their own. It's a big deal.
Yep.
I could see them hitting a point where they say, we don't want Chinese chips.
Oh, chips, the actual chips themselves, yeah. Yeah.
Because like those are the brain of any given piece of electronics.
Yep.
I could also see restrictions in specific industries. So
critical industries.
Yeah, like
security,
government, healthcare, communication.
Healthcare, money, financial.
Yep.
Yeah, the big ones.
And that could be on both the hardware and software side of things.
Yeah. How should businesses react to increasing bans on foreign tech? Well, if you're an importer and exporter of this stuff, like there's
well, if you're an importer exporter, there's like
You're up to date on what you can
there's
sell.
pretty broad application there. I'm thinking for like your typical Canadian business, I'd be watching where the tech you rely on comes from.
Absolutely.
Right? Like if you're a media production company, should your next drone be a Chinese drone, or should you try to find one
made in Germany, made in
Yeah. If you're just running any given business and you're looking at what e-commerce provider to use, well, Shopify is a Canadian solution.
Yep.
So you're pretty safe from these bans.
Yep. Amazon would be another one.
Yep.
Like they're not gonna, they're not gonna. Obviously, the U.S. is not gonna ban the things made. It's the same thing. If it's made in Canada, they're not gonna ban the thing made in Canada.
I don't know too many like Chinese owned and controlled e-commerce platforms, or even like software solutions in general. I'm sure they are out there. I'm sure businesses are using them.
I wouldn't even think about the software and hardware side. I would also think about who you were relying on to be a service provider. So we have a ton of people that we work where they do offshore their support, and they're relying on people in other countries as their support mechanism. And so like, great, the tool is created by a Canadian, but it's actually managed by...
Crackdowns on overseas technical support
would be insane.
Would be amazing.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if that entire industry died overnight because the government said, no, that's too much access for foreign agents to have to North American business data. You have to use North American-based
tech support. Tech support, customer support, pick a thing, but like
that would be
that's
a game changer.
That would be one of the next steps, because if you give your tech support or your customer or tech support to another country, what access do they have to the back end of your systems to do the thing?
Let's bring the scope back in. What types of businesses are in our network? What types of businesses are likely to listen to our stream? We're talking lawyers, local healthcare providers, Canadian e-commerce brands. If you're a company in that realm, you're probably already not outsourcing your customer support overseas because you're not at a scale where it makes any sense. And so for those businesses, the ones that are in our network and in our demographic, I'd say the software and hardware is the big thing to look at. Where is the technology you're using sourced out
coming from?
If you don't know the answer to that question, it might be a good idea to find out. And if you are using older software and you're thinking about upgrading, it might be the time to look at a Canadian provider. You have things as basic as your web hosting. Do you actually know where your data is stored?
I guarantee if we were to ask our clientele, more than 50% would have no idea.
Right. And we don't know if any of those services that these businesses rely on are going to be next to the chopping block with these government restrictions that are coming in foreign tech. What if they start to put restrictions on where businesses can store their data? Now, some of the clients we work with already have restrictions on where they can store their data.
Healthcare in the Canadian legal system, I've already got that pretty on lock. Which is good. But like I wouldn't anticipate that's gonna take too much more. Like there is protectionism happening.
And like some of it depends on the platform. If you're selling e-commerce products and you're selling on Shopify and Amazon,
you're good.
The government's going to come to Shopify and Amazon with the new requirements, and they're going to make the changes on their back end, and you're probably never even going to see it.
No. Nope.
But broadly speaking, over the years, we've worked with a lot of businesses that are using all kinds of technology providers from all over the world.
Well, think about people on WordPress with like 50 different plugins. Where are those plugins being created? What are the plugins actually doing? Oh, you've got a review widget on your WordPress store or on your WordPress site. That software, you probably didn't look into where it was created or what access it has or the things, anything around the basic functionality that you were looking for when you decided to look for a plugin. And there you go.
You might not even know this. Did you know that Shopify apps aren't hosted on Shopify servers?
I did not know that.
So there's There's really basic ones that are called extension apps, and that's what you would use if you just want to add like custom elements to a theme.
Okay.
But if your app does anything more complex than that, you're actually required to set up your own server, which gets called anytime the app wants to do anything more complex. And then that has to be integrated with Shopify's servers for things like
So like AWS loves that.
I'm sure, yeah. You can do AWS, DigitalOcean, there's a lot of options for it. But like even within the Shopify ecosystem, if you're relying on a ton of apps, those apps could be hosted on who knows where.
I guarantee you there are apps created by that are created out of country.
Oh yeah.
That are now found on the App Store. Let's take this out of the e-commerce space. Let's just even bring this to like everyday people. When you go to the Apple App Store, when you go to the Galaxy App Store, when you go to the pick a thing, most of those apps are not created. Like the world's a big place. Most of those apps are not created by Canadians or people in the United States.
It's true, right? Like the internet has become massively globalized. And it's really fascinating to see governments trying to claw that back and become more protective of their technology infrastructure. It's going to be really fascinating to see how the market is forced to react as the government restricts where your technology can come from. And
on that, when you downloaded an app onto your phone, or if it was in business, how many people do you think are reading the terms and conditions and permission requirements of that app?
Oh, most people aren't. And that's a well-known fact.
That's a well-known fact, right? So
but when we're talking about bad actors, it doesn't matter what's in the terms and conditions.
But
if the Chinese government decides they're going to take over a bunch of apps that were developed in China and spy on everyone's phones,
there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. They're going to lie about it and they're not going to tell you in the terms of service, right? So there's not only so much you can do to protect yourself. I just think you're not going to get away from foreign-controlled technology.
Nope.
But for your critical infrastructure, and I don't mean government critical infrastructure that we need for society, I mean for your critical infrastructure that you need to run your business, just consider looking at where those technologies are hosted, where those technologies are developed, and start thinking about future-proofing. Because if the next ban stop you from being able to use that technology, you might have to make changes in a hurry. And I'd rather be proactive than reacting to that.
I have a perfect one, and then I don't have too much more to add on this topic, but this last one. We get asked a million times, should the business start a TikTok account?
Yeah.
Should I go
That's a great
and
example.
invest time, effort, money, resources into another social media platform? And that's still a big maybe. And I don't have a crystal ball. I know that, again, this is the trend. Is it surprising? Should business react? If you want to go and try to build an audience on TikTok, just know the risk that if TikTok was to get banned in Canada, the US, that effort will have been for nothing.